Delighted to say this morning, Jonathan Gibson, political commentator, and Max Harrison, Reform candidate and political commentator. Good morning to the two.
Good morning.
Good morning. We were just talking about, the fact is, you first came in here when you were 18.
Yeah, I think it was. The first week I did was the Chris Pincher story, which is now feels quite relevant, given everyone talking about Boris.
But also, I don't feel we've moved very far in this country.
Oh, honestly, no. It's been one scandal after the next. What's next?
What's next? Now, look, I want to start with this Sunday Times rich list, because both of you are obviously terribly wealthy. But there's something, and I mentioned this earlier, Alfie Best. I mean, he's done incredibly well. He wants to become Britain's first Romany Gypsy billionaire. He's climbed by £202 million in a year to £947 million. But he has said, and I've said this morning already, we are losing the wealth creators. We are in a complete mess, and I'm paraphrasing. Our tax system, our business regulations, they're sterilising the people who build the economies. We need people to start businesses, create jobs. We're hearing from people at home as well saying, and that's the whole point. Where's the mission? Where's the vision? Where's the drive?
Well, there's no incentive to do any wealth creation in this country anymore. That's the issue. We've had 14 years of Conservative governance wherein we've seen high taxes, huge amounts of regulations on business, on enterprise. So although I absolutely commend him in his efforts, going up so much, in the hundreds of millions of pounds, he's absolutely right. We voted Brexit to take back control and to ensure that we could have a government and let's say an economy where we ensure that we pushed entrepreneurialism. And nowadays, it's just absolutely the other way around. I can see why they're all leaving. Good on them.
And so David Soffer, who was here earlier, who's founder of TechRound, he was saying exactly that. Brexit was a golden opportunity, whether you voted for it or not, or like it or not. The point is that we redrew the map, and really we could have started again and made this a low-tax economy or whatever we wanted to do, but we didn't do it.
I mean, look, Brexit at the same time also created business instability because they weren't necessarily sure what's going to happen. And we've seen with, the different Brexit negotiations, companies have had that element of uncertainty. Another element that I would put to this is more than just money. I think it's about infrastructure, things like healthcare, national services, which have been absolutely slashed and cut. And, if you look at
the NHS, remember, has had more money than ever before.
But you've also had, firstly, massive inflation. You've had
massive immigration.
Well, yeah, you've had massive immigration, but they've also been the main contributors in terms of building the healthcare system, and they've been reliant, for better or for worse, that we've been absolutely reliant on migrant workers for our NHS, and, we couldn't do it just with sort of British workers, and they've actually contributed and made a net contribution to the economy. So I would argue that we need protection from the market in some ways, and we can talk about making Britain great again. If we're seeing the great period as being sort of from the 1940s to maybe the 1970s, in which there was the post-war boom and people had social protection and there were taxes, but there was also strong infrastructure and strong sort of social democracy. Maybe it's time to rethink our economy since the onslaught of kind of neoliberalism post-Thatcher.
So also, Max, I'm interested in this. The final straw for Best came when Hunt announced the non-dom tax status would be scrapped. Now, this was seen by many to be a great leveller because that seemed unfair that people had the ability to have that. It's a 200-year-old system, and that means that people do not pay UK tax on their overseas earnings. And he goes on to say, I thought Rishi Sunak would be like a second Jesus for our country, encouraging the wealth creators, understanding what it's like to have wealth. And they're voting with their feet. They're basically saying, right, I'm off. I'm going to a country that treats us better, where actually I can pay less tax.
Well, rightly so. If you've, let's say, built up a business, built up a successful company which has brought in hundreds of millions, billions of pounds, you deserve, let's say, the rewards of that. And if this country, the country which you're born in, doesn't reward you for such success, such bravery, such entrepreneurialism, then rightly so, go. I mean, one of the other points I think which is important is that in 2019, the Conservatives promised to level up the country. So that was taking out the money from London, going into elsewhere, to Manchester, to Liverpool, to Birmingham, or rest around the country, to boost up local areas, to get more jobs. And what we've seen, £500 million in the last 5 years in levelling up, it's very little. There's actually nothing to it. So actually, we stayed London-centric. That stagnated in light of what you said about, let's say,
So
Brexit.
was that the vision? Was that the mission?
I think so. Actually, make Britain great again. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean put everything into the centre of London. It's ensuring that every city, every area in our country, every region has got equal opportunity for all.
But how are you supposed to do that if you don't have the tax revenue through which to give people, if you can't tax people?
Well, this is my issue when we talk about, let's say, the economy and when we talk about finances. Everyone says about tax. It's not just about tax. Make sure that we are spending our money wisely, not spending £150 billion on the NHS, not having foreign aid at stupid rates. Actually, if you put the money in the right places, we can actually achieve these things. Stop paying billions of pounds for illegal immigrants.
So you mentioned an over-reliance. You see, I'm just thinking back to my grandmother and grandparents' days in Coventry, for example. example, we had enormous powerhouses of industry based in Coventry and based in Sheffield, for example. And we no longer seem to have that. There's a massive over-reliance on importing everything from China, and we talked about that earlier. You go onto Amazon and it comes from China. We have no idea of the provenance of that. We're talking about food security. We don't grow enough food. No one looks after the farmers.
But this is my thing. I don't think it's necessarily, and Brexit was necessarily so much. In some ways, it's a reflection of culture and things like that. But actually, at the same time, globalization has had a massive role in this. And we talk about, you know, these situations in which labour is moving across to other countries. That is simply because we are relying possibly too much on the free market. And so all this talk about, you know, oh, we should reduce taxes and we should reduce tariffs and we should make things, you know, worry about having a socialist economy. At the same time, a lot of these people feel like, oh, well, we're losing our labour to foreign workers in other countries, and we don't make anything in this country anymore. We've hemorrhaged businesses because we don't have the ability to compete. And whether that's through kind of closing some of the controls on the free market, that would obviously be very unpopular amongst a conservative government, you know, but it's maybe something that we need and reflects a sort of will from the people, not to have more right-wing economics, but to actually have some protection.
So the other thing that strikes me is we've got so many young people who are not in education, employment or training, and have we made it too easy for them?
In general, yes. We have far too many people going to universities. We should be rebuilding our polytechnics like we used to, ensuring that we've got engineers, electricians. You know, again, when we talk about doctors and nurses, try and incentivise people to undertake those courses as well. So getting rid of all those sort of training caps, etc. We need to be ensuring that the next generation of Britons, they have the opportunity for everything and to be successful themselves. And
I'm just looking at these numbers. They're extraordinary. 770,000 under 25s not in education, employment or training. What are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I think academia we need to think about vocation. But again, at the same time, you know, my girlfriend's she's doing mechanical engineering. I can tell you it's not easy, even with a really good degree. No, but even with a really good degree in mechanical engineering from one of the top universities, to get a job as an engineer is really, really difficult. It's not particularly high paid, and it goes back, you know, we're not really making things. And I think there does need to be more focus on vocation and maybe less focus on sort of just abstract academia. And that comes with changing infrastructure and focusing on, you know, building into apprenticeships and things like that, because there are amazing opportunities.
So we're talking also about infrastructure here. The front page of the Sunday Telegraph this morning, Labour will tell NHS staff to work weekends. NHS staff will be told to work evenings and weekends under Labour plans to shorten waiting lists. This is according to Wes Streeting. He says they will pool staff and pool their waiting lists. These are neighbouring hospitals as part of a £1.1 billion drive to provide an extra 40,000 appointments. There is no detail in any of this, basically. He says we need to train more doctors. He acknowledges that actually it's going to take a long time to train doctors, which we know, to be fair to the Conservative government, 7,500 trainees going up to 15,000, it takes time. But actually, isn't it... It's the fact, and you mentioned the fact we're over-reliant on importing everyone. How many people have we imported because it's their quick fix into the NHS? Particularly, I'm thinking of the amazing Filipino nurses, for example, that are basically propping up the entirety of the NHS.
Well, it's quite interesting to see, for example, Australia, their healthcare system. They spent almost no money investing in their medical schools, which are very, very expensive for the country to do. And what they do is they actually instead spend that money on bringing in foreign labour, giving them amazing wages to incentivise them, amazing benefits, and they have, you know, pretty strong healthcare.
Well, they're doing the same, aren't they? They're attracting all our British graduates and saying, come here because the lager's cheap and actually the sun shines and you can have a lovely time.
Well, no, absolutely. And my issue is with Wes Streeting's comments is that it's all sound bites. It's very easy to say, let's get people, you know, working on the weekends. Let's, you know, fill up more spaces on beds and get more doctors. It's all well and good saying that, but actually, at the end of the day, who's going to be paying that? The British taxpayer. And this is my issue with Labour. They are promising billions of pounds to get into the next, to win the next election and to get Keir Starmer number 10. Phenomenal, but at the same time, who is going to pay?
So apparently, their spending wish list, and look, it may be the right thing to do, will cost £74 billion a year. This is going to be an Achilles heel, isn't it? Because actually, Labour's biggest problem, I think, is trying to prove to the electorate that they are going to be economically competent.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't envy their position going into the role when they inevitably
there's no money left.
There's no money left. There's massive debts. You know, the morale is incredibly low in the NHS.
Yes,
why would you? You know, I was speaking to like a dean of a medical university, and he's saying, you know, applications are down 20% because, and I can completely understand that. I speak to my peers, and you know, they're spending 7 years or whatever training to be a doctor, incredibly high fees that they have to pay for that. Then housing is incredibly expensive, and so it's like, you know, really, is there such a strong incentive? So it's a very difficult position. I think I possibly disagree with you when I say that NHS is simply a waste of money, because it is a public good. You know, it increases our productivity. It means that employers, for example, can firstly send their people who work for them to actually get healthcare so they're not out of work for long periods of time. Maybe we want it as a country in some sort of protection if we suddenly get really ill. But again, it's going to be very challenging.
You see, so there's no vision, there's no drive. And look, going back 100 years to when I first qualified, we then lived in the nurses' home. I was on site. It was cheap accommodation. We didn't actually have to pay our fees. So that made a huge difference. Now my friends and young people who qualify, as you rightly say, have huge debts. Why would you work in this country? You're not looked after. The hours are better than they were when I trained. But it's not a job that I think that's certainly not the job that it was. And when you look at 1 in 5 people in the NHS is now brought in from abroad, I think we've got a really big problem. Let's just pause, Jonathan and Max, for the moment. We'll continue with more future politics after this break. This is Talk.
James Whale Unleashed does not interview people who've just got a new book out. We talk about the issues of the day, the things that are really winding people up. Most of all, I want you on the phone. Saturday night, 7 o'clock. Be warned.
Their own. And Peter in my sunny county of Suffolk. Good morning to you, Peter. Hi, David. We can't have the heavy northern industrial base anymore. It will interfere with the climate nonsense. I'm sure my guests will have something to say about that. Jonathan Gibson, Max Harrison join us this morning for Future Politics panel. There's a lot of sense in that, actually. The climate nonsense, Jonathan. How about having an industrial base? Also, what about blast furnaces? We're having now electric arc furnaces, which are rubbish.
Well, it depends, as in maybe those aren't so good, but you can find other industries which are less carbon.
What about the family-run businesses? There is a lot of truth in that.
I agree, but I agree with the problem. The symptom is something very, like, how we deal with this problem. Maybe I'm not so sure what your viewer would say about that and whether we would agree.
Well, does this go back to a much bigger problem, which is actually apprenticeships? We were talking about there. We had a caller on earlier saying that they need to start at 16. I think he actually mentioned he went into steelworks at 15. But I wonder whether young people, it's too easy, isn't it? You sit there with your Sky TV, you've got a lovely time at home. It's too easy. And actually you need to get off your bottom, have an apprenticeship and learn to work.
Oh, young people haven't got an ounce or iota about hard work nowadays. You know, they get upset if you say the wrong pronouns. I mean, these are not, real adults going into the real working world. They do 3 to 4 years at university in their nice little social bubbles where they drink and whatnot, and then they think they're going to the real world and that's going to be okay. And it's just absolutely not the case. What young people nowadays that need to be a bit like Thatcher, actually, turn around and go, someone's strong, and turn around and go, actually, enough is enough. You know, you've got to actually work hard now and get off your bottom.
I mean, I feel for young people. I think they've got one of the hardest, in the last 50 years or 70 years, I would argue. Well, look, you've got record housing prices, you've got record sort of inequality, you feel very kind of left behind. The market is not very favourable to you at the moment.
But the market's never been favourable necessarily. What about the war? What about post-war? That was pretty hard.
Post-war, you had a massive boom. And the 1960s, which is really interesting that your viewer talks about, there you had much higher taxation than we had here, and much more redistribution. So I'm not sure that they're naturally...
But hang on a minute, in the 1970s when I was growing up, we actually did work. So I went fruit picking, I did potato picking, I did every kind of picking, I mended tractors.
Good, and I hope most young people like myself have done work throughout my time at school, throughout my time at university. I've got 4 hours work straight after this on my Sunday, tutoring, coaching and whatever else.
Very impressive.
So I'm not saying that
exemplary. You are not normal for your age. Okay, you're not normal.
But not normal as a person. I'm very strange. But
you're not. No. But this is my issue. You say it's not favourable to young people. Why? Why are young people so entitled to think that the market should revolve around them? Why don't they cancel their Netflix subscriptions? Stop going out eating out 3 times a week and having drinks. Rather than just saving and actually working hard. Stop having holidays and thinking that Instagram's your world.
That's a really important point. And I hear this a lot from our viewers and listeners, which is they said they scrimped and they saved. They put every penny into buying their first house or whatever. And Max has a point. Netflix, going on holiday, thinking it's okay to go to Benidorm 3 times a year or whatever it is. Actually, if you can't afford it, it isn't.
I mean, I think it's a bit of a misnomer. There's lots of people, at university with me who are using food banks, who are not thriving, who are not got lots of money necessarily. And yeah, there's people who, maybe haven't been taught how to save, maybe people that waste money. But again, a lot of people will say, okay, so I'm spending, I don't know, £20 on this. What's the point if I'm never going to be able to earn a house or I'm never going to have a high-paying job? I may as well just kind of live in the moment. And so people have to have an ambition and a drive and something to work towards. And I guess people are feeling like there isn't really that at the moment. Maybe we need to reinstall that. Maybe we need to think about restructuring our economy, finding better options, and kind of inspiring young people who feel kind of
vision, drive, and mission.
But David's absolutely spot on. young people used to go out and do fruit picking, but nowadays young people will think they're too good to do fruit picking.
That's right.
They've gone and done their social gender study university or degree at whatever university, 112th in the league, whatever, and they think they're too good for it. And actually what we have done is built an economy wherein you can earn more money from not working. And that's the issue. We've actually incentivised not to do hard work. That's why the billionaires are leaving. That's why we keep talking about raising taxes. Why should hard-working Britons be paying for the taxes of people who can't be bothered to work? It's absolutely bananas. It's bamboozling.
But you can't. I mean, you can't earn more money not paying when you're claiming benefits. It's much smaller.
That is not true. If you are a single mother and you have 2 children, you will earn more money from that than someone who earns £42,500 a year. That's absolutely right.
Again, I need to check that. But I do want to move on. You're a barrister, you're a lawyer, actually. You're a baby barrister. You're a baby barrister. I just want to ask your thoughts on this, really, because court wigs are on trial. English courts are in talks to abandon compulsory wigs for barristers amid claims they are culturally insensitive. Apparently, the judiciary is poised to update its court dress code following complaints by some barristers that traditional headpieces discriminate against those with Afro-Caribbean hair. They're now looking at this, the Bar Council. Your thoughts?
Rubbish. I mean, how absolutely silly. I mean, why do we have to keep on eroding our history, things that are important, things that actually are British and are authentically ours? I mean, only 15% of barristers are from ethnic minorities. That's from the BSB. And so they're not right now calling for them to be scrapped permanently, only trying to make them not compulsory. At the moment, they're not in the family courts, they're not in the Supreme Court,
that's right.
They're not in civil courts. But again, why can't we actually keep a little bit of our history, something that's really important? Why do we have to scrap and erode it and change things? We're a fantastic country. We talk about making Britain great again. How about keeping a little bit of our history and our tradition?
Michael Etienne, a barrister, he's a black barrister, he has an afro hairstyle. In 2022, he sparked a debate after being ordered to wear a wig in court or face disciplinary action. He said this is racism, it's discrimination. I would argue that a white wig, which is not realistic in any sense, is not discriminatory. They look, I agree with Max, I think it's about standards and principle, and it's about actually tradition.
I think it is about tradition. From what I understood from the article, the complaint was not necessarily so much about the colour, but in the way that it interacted with the texture of the hair. And so that's what I understood. Yeah. You know, I'm not an expert on
so understanding that, does that change your view?
Well, look, if you can find a wig that maybe is more accommodating to that kind of hairstyle, I think that'd be a great solution. And I don't have, I can see the value of tradition, I can see the value, but again, I don't want it to, hurt people in terms of if they can't physically do it or it doesn't work with their hair structure. So come up with, a solution which works for people who are...
It just seems, you're right, that we have to change every institution for the sake of change. And obviously every generation will always push back and always try and affect some sort of change. Now, this is interesting, and you mentioned, I think you mentioned badges or pronouns or something earlier. If you were asked to wear a pronoun badge, OK, so this is in your place of work, would you stay with that company? Well, 4 in 10 people say they would be less likely to keep working for a company if they were asked to wear a badge showing their pronoun. So this is based on how many pronouns can you have? About 400.
Yes, why not? Every time I've always been asked, I've always declined.
Have you been asked?
Absolutely. In my former place of employment, we were all asked to do it on our emails, and I always declined. It's absolutely no business to anyone else what my agenda may be. We do not need to be shoving these things down people's throats. And I absolutely agree. I mean, the article said 75% of people believe that people should be should get jobs on merit. There's this whole tokenism about trying to push for diversity boxes, etc. It's bananas. It's absolutely bananas, David. And I think I'm glad that people are actually starting to realise, yes, actually, I'm not going to work at a place that's going to shove woke gender ideology down down the throat.
So this was a survey of 1,993 adults. 43% said they would be less likely to continue working for a company that asked them to wear pronoun badges. I have a major issue with that. If I was asked to wear a pronoun badge, I'd refuse as well.
And I think people want a separation of very political issues from the workplace. I can understand that. I don't think people want to be a political object, in a sense, and part of this whole debate. And many people just want to get on with their work and do their job, and so I can understand that.
Well, 2 people have got on with their job marvellously. You two.
It's definitely nothing to do with politics.
Thank you ever so much for coming in. That's Jonathan Gibson, Max Harrison. They're both political commentators. And